I'm going to start this video off by saying it is definitely not a tutorial, but I am Cameron. I'm the marketing director for Fashion Department London, and I'm making a linen shirt based off our PM.010 men's formal shirt pattern, but I'm using it with linen. So here I've just printed out the first page and I'm just checking the scale to make sure it's all right, and then I've printed out the rest of the pattern, and again I'm just going to double check the scale just to make sure nothing has changed on the printer. So that's what the little ruler is you can see on the first page. Piecing together the whole pattern, it probably took about an hour. I think this one had 41 pieces to it. You can see in the bottom of the screen there's just a little grid there. It tells you exactly where each piece goes together. Pretty simple to do, it's just quite a long process, and you can see it takes up quite a bit of room. But once I've done this, then I just start to cut out each individual piece. It doesn't have every piece because you can use some of the pieces multiple times for parts that are the same. But here you can see me make a mistake and the realization I cut out the seam allowance. So I had to quickly take that back together and then actually cut it along the correct line. I just wasn't paying attention to where I was cutting. I did make a couple changes to this shirt. It's a pattern that's got a concealed button stand. I didn't want to have the concealed button stand, and I actually didn't put normal buttons into this. I used snapper popper buttons instead, so I didn't have to put in those buttonholes and whatnot. So my experience with sewing is actually, I bought a machine in lockdown and I made a couple of things, mainly a golf bag and like a couple of small bags, and then didn't really touch my machine again except from repairing my jeans. But I'm doing this because I wanted to kind of test out how the customer experience is with our patterns and the packs you get. So you'll see me looking at our instructions, and then also I watch a few of our videos to make sure they're actually understandable for someone who's got a little bit of experience with sewing but isn't that experienced. So if you're a student or if you've made a few things here and there, then you should find it quite simple to put this pattern together. Again, this isn't a tutorial, this is just me documenting my experience with getting everything together. And I think I did pretty well. Some of the pieces I didn't cut quite right, and you'll see in the sort of end product there's a few bits to improve, but this is the first shirt that I ever made. And speaking to Anthony, the managing director of FDL, and he's also one that is very experienced with sewing and knows what he's doing. He's also hands that you can see in the tutorials. He was actually kind of a little bit impressed with how I actually got all of this together. It took me, I think it was about 14 hours in total across 2 days to actually get it all together. And he was actually saying even a professional tailor, when they're putting together a shirt, they can take sort of 6-8 hours. They can take a full day to make a shirt as well. So pretty happy with how long it actually took. Putting together the pattern and then cutting out all the pieces definitely felt like it was one of the longest and most tedious parts. But I guess that's normal when it comes to patterns. You can see just on the bottom left where the pen is, I'm using that as a sheet just to make sure I've got all the pieces. Glad I did because I was missing one. But that actually shows you how to make the most efficient use of your fabric as well, depending on the width. So, didn't film the first clip, but I folded and ironed the button stands, and now I'm just stitching them down. Really simple bit, you just sort of fold over by, I think it's about an inch on each side of each panel of the garment to the right and left, and then just stitch them down. And here I'm watching the video on how to sew a yoke. Never done that before, and I thought this was going to be a really difficult part of the whole shirt. I thought it was going to be the hardest actually. But once you kind of understand how to fold those inner bits, I actually found it was quite simple to do compared to some of the other parts of the shirt. But you can see that I watched the video 3 or 4 times, and I'll link the video below if you want to go ahead and watch that as well. So this is the sort of complicated bit of sewing a yoke, because you have to sort of do some really weird kind of folding to make sure it all comes out right. But like I said, it wasn't actually that difficult. I was quite surprised. You can see it is quite sort of fiddly to get all those pieces together. That's why it's helpful to use the pins, just to make sure you're actually definitely stitching the right pieces together. But yeah, I was actually pretty proud and happy about how this turned up. And again, I showed Anthony this, and he's like, "Oh, that's kind of impressive." So I'm gonna take it now. So this is a video on how to sew a felled seam, which is a really nice and sort of clean way of having your seams in a shirt. I think most sort of decently made shirts are done like that instead of using a sort of overlocker machine or serger, depending on how you call it. But yeah, you just cut off one side of the seam and then fold over the other side, and that hides away the raw edge of the seam that you've cut, and then you just do a quick stitch to stitch that down, and you get a really nice clean finished seam. Doing that on both sides, obviously. So now I'm doing the bottom hem, and I first just fold it over and iron it down by 1 centimeter, and then I do a second fold just to encapsulate all of that raw edging, and then I'll do just one single stitch along the entire length of the bottom of the shirt. It does sort of end up clumping up and like bunching up a little bit near the end. So I think that might have been down to me sort of stretching and pulling the fabric a little bit too much. It could have helped to cut some of the curves just to give a little bit of relief, just so I didn't get as much bunching, but when you press it down, it's really hard to notice. Now I've moved on to the sleeves, and I'm snipping and marking out where the placket goes. And for me, this was by far the most difficult part of putting this shirt together. I think I snipped into the sleeve a little bit too far, and the sort of top of it didn't turn out too great. It is decent, but it should have had a sort of square finishing at the top, but I did a design element of my own and did a bit of a sort of angled piece, I guess you say. You can sort of see it in a minute, but the second placket that I do, which I think I cut out of this, I only showed the first one. The second one turned out much better, and I guess you go to school on the first one anyway. So if I was ever to make another shirt, which I think I will at some point, I can imagine it'll definitely turn out better. But you'll see at the end I show the full shirt together, and the right hand placket definitely looks a lot better because that's the one I did second. So I learned a lot on the first one, made the second one better, and then if I was to do another one, I'm sure it would be better the next time as well. You can see just at the top of the placket it is supposed to be squared, but I ended up sort of folding it in a little bit because I actually quite liked that sort of the design of that. I think it looked a bit more interesting than just having a square finish. But also I very rarely wear, I've worn this shirt quite a bit. I mostly wear this shirt with the sleeves rolled up anyway, so you can't really see the placket, so it doesn't bother me too much. Turns out I didn't cut out the second sleeve, I thought I did. But I think even whilst I'm ironing it, you can see it has turned out a little bit better and a little bit neater on this second one. But yeah, we have multiple videos on sewing plackets. Again, I'll link them in the description below so you can check them out. We've got, on any of our patterns, we have a little tutorial section at the bottom of the page where you can see how to sew some of the sort of more difficult parts of each garment. So here I'm just using the tweezers to make sure everything's sort of aligned and trying to make it as neat as I possibly can. I'm not missing anything, but you can see there, that was the second placket and I thought it looked pretty decent. So now I'm just putting the sleeves together, and again I'm going to do a felt seam on this as well. I thought this was going to be quite difficult because obviously you've got to try and sew into a tube. But it actually wasn't too difficult. But I did end up running out of thread, or the thread snapped, I can't quite remember, which was quite annoying. And you can see the disappointment in my face in a second. So again, I just duplicated that on the other sleeve, and now I'm putting together the cuffs. And then I'm just going to iron these down just to sort of make those folds really nice and crisp. Obviously with it being linen, it doesn't sort of stay too well, especially once washed, but setting a good foundation from the beginning to try and make the shirt look as good as I can from the get-go. This is also part of the video we have with the placket, but this bit actually confused me a little because I forgot that there was supposed to be a small little pleat in the cuff. So you can see me looking there on the instructions, and I discover that there should be a little fold. So you can kind of see that at the end. I think I put it in. But yeah, for a minute it did confuse me as to why the shirt seemed to be an inch longer than the cuff. But there you can see the placket. Not placket, pleat. So I was sewing until about 1 AM that day, so this is the next day now. And now I'm just setting in the sleeves. Again, in the background there you can just see our tutorial on how to set in a sleeve. The only thing I didn't do here was actually finish the edging, so it has left it frayed and raw. I think I'm just going to take a pair of pinking shears and cut along that, but you could do a fell seam on the inside of the sleeve as well. And that does give quite a nice clean finish. But setting in the sleeves wasn't too difficult either. I thought that was going to be a bit harder than it was. But it's just sewing a circle, I guess. So it wasn't too bad. Yeah, I enjoyed making this shirt, as sort of tedious and frustrating as it was as I was doing it all. It actually was quite fun. So now I'm just doing the collar, and here what I'm doing, the black string is called a perfect corner. And you basically stitch up to the edge with one stitch left, and then you tie in some string, do a few knots, put it through to the other side of material and do one more stitch, and then do your corner. And then when you turn that out, you can just pull on the string, which you can see here, and it gives you a really nice sharp corner. But I didn't tie the second one enough, so the string just came out. So I ended up just using the snips and my fingers just sort of push out that seam, that corner a little bit more to make it a little bit sharper. And then I just press it all down. And now I do a sort of design stitch around the edge. You don't really have to do this, it's a design choice, but I quite like the look of it. And then on the raw edge bit I do a stay stitch, and that's just to help me with the next bit to stop the two pieces of fabric moving around as I'm putting them onto the collar stand. The collar stand was probably the second hardest part of putting this together, and you can see I'm watching the video a couple times just to make sure I'm doing everything right. I think I actually potentially cut the collar and the collar stand probably about a centimetre or two too short, and it ended up meaning I had a little bit of bunching and some accidental pleats in the collar, where the collar meets the rest of the shirt. And I actually mis-sewn a little bit there, so I just had to unpick a few stitches to make sure it was all right. But at the end, you can kind of see where I've got a bit of a unwanted fold. Again, it's my first shirt, so I'm not that bothered about it. I've worn the shirt quite a bit since making it. The video, I think I filmed it probably 2 months ago now, and everyone that's seen me wearing it actually has complimented me and is quite impressed that I actually made it. But it actually fits really well, and even with all of the little mistakes, I'm really happy with the shirt in the end. So I'm just using the tweezers there to make sure everything is trying to sort of stay where it should. And then I think I just fold it over now and then give it a little press, and then tuck all of that raw edge for the body of the shirt in, and then give it a stitch down. So yeah, I got a lot of, I believe it's called easing, which is where the fabric moved a lot, and it did give some unwanted pleats, but you can barely tell, especially when the collar's down. You can't even see any of it. But that is the basics of the shirt done, and now I'm just marking out where the button snaps will go. For this, I didn't actually have the tool to properly attach these to the shirt, so I ended up using a biro and just sort of took out the ink and then used that around the snapper part of it, just so I didn't crush the protruding bit, I don't know what it's called, with the hammer. And then after I've done all of that, I think I just use a pair of pliers as well, just to make sure everything is in nice and tight. I don't do a top button on this, and I didn't put any buttons on the cuffs either, because again, I just knew I'm never going to use them. I wear this mostly as an overshirt, and then sometimes in the summer, because it is quite a nice linen, I will just wear it on its own as well. And then this is after it's been washed a couple times. It's shrunk a little bit, but here you can sort of see that was the first placket, and then this is the second one. The second one definitely looks a little bit better. And then just at the collar, you can see the snaps first, but then I showed just the collar where there's got those few little pieces that have sort of folded over that shouldn't have happened. And again, I think that just comes down to machine control, but there's a quick little picture of me wearing it as well. Pretty happy in the end.